Welcome, one and all, to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, your friends, your family, everybody is doing well. Hope anybody listening, everybody in Braves country had a great Thanksgiving. It's good to be back with you once again. But I gotta say this, it's even a bit better to be back with one of the best when it comes to breaking down the Braves, my good friend, podcast partner, Stephen Tolbert. Stephen, good to see you again, sir. Always glad to do these with you.
What's up, buddy? It's been a minute. We were just talking offline. It's been over a week since we've done one of these together. And obviously during the season, that never happens. We do 2 or 3 a week. Yeah, we obviously, the podcast took a little bit of a break for Thanksgiving. We had the show with Scott and Carlos that ran, I think, the day before Thanksgiving. Scott and Brad did a show on Sunday. So yeah, we're jumping back in, and not a moment too soon because we got some very interesting stuff that dropped this morning. And I was tweeting about it earlier today, and it was the buzz online all day today. People, throwing out takes, throwing out trades. Yeah, we're going to jump right into this Byron Buxton stuff that dropped about 10 a.m. this morning.
So let's set the stage a bit with a little bit of a timeline. So you go back to the 2025 trade deadline, and it was a bit of a boring one for the Braves, but perhaps the most intriguing, interesting news came out. I believe it was Dan Hayes, who covers the Athletic for the Twins. He mentioned that he wrote a story about the fact that some teams came calling about Byron Buxton, who has a full no-trade clause with the Twins, and this was in the midst of Byron Buxton having one of the best seasons of his career, one of the best, healthiest seasons he's had in quite a while. And he mentioned that the Braves and the Mets were two of the teams that really stood out as having interest in Buxton. But he also pointed out Buxton loves Minnesota, and it was very unlikely, almost seemed impossible, that he was going to waive his no-trade clause. But it was at least intriguing to see that was a target for the Braves. So we come into the offseason, and we start to, kind of speculate, okay, could we revisit Byron Buxton? Braves coaching staff gets a big turnover. Couple of notable names on the coaching staff have ties to Byron Buxton. Don't want to, blow that out of proportion or anything, but just something notable. And then we started to hear rumblings, Byron Buxton could be a bit more open to waiving that no-trade clause depending on what the Twins do. And then today, Jeff Passan and Kyle McDaniel of ESPN released their top 25 trade candidates, and Byron Buxton is number 5 on the list. Now, the thing that stood out to me, Stephen, was number one, Byron Buxton. The first thing Jeff Passan mentioned, Byron Buxton would be willing to waive his no-trade clause in the right situation, especially if the Twins, quote-unquote, were going to trade away some of their headliners. We're going to continue to go into a full rebuild. At that point, Buxton would be willing to waive his no-trade clause. But even more eye-opening to me is that he specifically mentioned or hinted at the Braves in his opening sentence about Byron Buxton. And the only player of that top 25 list that the Braves are connected to is Byron Buxton. And more importantly than anything, Jeff Passan didn't go to the lengths he did with Buxton and the Braves with any other player or any other team. That tells me there's smoke. That tells me that it's understood that this is just more than a pipe dream or speculation or something like that. There likely is proof of real interest, and that's where the most intrigue comes from the most intriguing support we've gotten so far this offseason.
Yeah. I mean, this is as smoky as you get for the Braves. We don't get a lot of this. You get the random Twitter user making up fake trades and people respond to that. But this is not that. This is not like chop till you drop 69, 775, 76 coming up with a fake trade and everybody responding to it. This is Jeff Passan pointing out specifically that Byron Buxton would waive his no-trade clause to go to Atlanta, mentioning Atlanta in the first sentence of his little excerpt on Buxton. Buxton is a Georgia native. I think most people know that by now. On top of the fact that there was already smoke when The Athletic, like you mentioned, Dan Hayes of The Athletic, who covers the Twins for The Athletic, right after the trade deadline, mentioned the Braves called the Twins about Byron Buxton. And at the time, Buxton gave a very kind of no-nonsense answer about, I am not waiving my no-trade clause. People remember, like, it was a very, very loud and clear no. I love in Minnesota. I'm not waiving my no-trade clause. And, when you have a full no-trade clause, that can really kind of be the beginning and the end of the conversation. If you have no interest in waiving your no-trade clause, then that's it. There's nothing else to talk about. And so in my brain, that has always been the number one impediment to a deal for Byron Buxton, is the fact that he doesn't want to leave Minnesota. That's what made today's news so notable and so interesting. Not only that he's willing to do it, but that the Braves were directly connected by the number one insider in the entire sport, Jeff Passan of ESPN, who breaks more news and is more connected than anybody. So this is a fascinating conversation. I tweeted this out at like 10 a.m., 9 a.m., something like that. And all day I've just been watching my mentions, just listening to the conversations people are having about the pros of Byron Buxton, the cons of Byron Buxton, how much they think it will cost. And there's some wild opinions. Some people have some really out of left field opinion. We're going to talk about it all. The thing I want to start with, and we'll get to the injury stuff, and we'll get to the cost. The thing I want to start with first, though, is that you are not given the opportunity to trade for a talent like Byron Buxton basically ever. These guys do not get traded. This is the Ronald Acuna Jr. of the Minnesota Twins. And just think, if you're a Braves fan, how willing would you be to trade? Would you be trading Ronald Acuna Jr. at any point? This is that level of talent. This is like a superstar, 5-tool. Yes, there's injury concerns, and we'll get to those in a minute. But at the very beginning of this conversation, I want to highlight this point. You do not get the opportunity to trade for players of this caliber basically ever. Guys like this don't get traded. And if there is a real possibility that the Braves can pull this off, they need to be hyper aggressive about it, because this is the kind of impact bat that the Braves desperately need in their lineup, in my opinion. And then we've talked about it all offseason. We talked about it during the season. I think people are glossing over the holes in the offense too much. I know the team needs pitching. I know the team needs bullpen. But in my opinion, what we watched the last 2 years when everyone's healthy is not good enough. And somewhere along the way, the offense has gotten kind of ignored in all of these conversations about what the Braves should do this offseason. And I think the offense should be much higher on the list. And Byron Buxton is a type of hitter that changes your lineup. He is a dynamic, top of the order, middle of the order, wherever you want to put him. Guy can hit 40 homers. He's just a monster. He's like a 130 WRC plus hitter. You do not get those guys. Those guys do not become available very often. And so, yes, we're going to get into the injury stuff. We're definitely going to get into how much it's going to cost, because some people are way off on that. But at the top, the headline is, guys at his level don't get traded very often. If you have a chance to do it, you need to be aggressive.
1,000%. And again, I want to hit on, I don't think that it's talked about enough when you see a guy who just is so purely naturally talented. Like, we see what Ronald Acuna Jr. does and how he still is as talented as he is, despite the injuries that he has had. Byron Buxton is at that level. Like, that needs to be said. Despite all the injuries that he has had, Stephen, here's where he was at the age of 31 this past year. 90th percentile or above, according to Baseball Savant, in batting run value, base running value, expected slugging, average exit velocity, barrel percentage, hard hit percentage. He was 88th percentile in bat speed, 100th percentile in sprint speed. You want to talk about top 1% athlete that has played baseball in history, and even more rare, an athlete who can put it all into effective function as a baseball player. I'm not trying to say that Byron Buxton is a top 10 player of all time. He is one of the 10 most naturally talented offensive players, position players we've seen maybe in our generation. I will go that far. He is an unbelievable natural talent. And the fact that it is still on so much display right now, despite how injured he's been in the recent past, that's what is amazing. And I mention all that to say this. I know Alex Anthopoulos can talk about needing to fill the shortstop position. I know that Alex Anthopoulos can talk about needing to get a starting pitcher, the bullpen, all that different stuff. We saw yesterday the Zips projections come out for the Braves, and they reflected what the simple truth, the unfortunate truth is over the past 2 years. Injuries and underperformance have been the two big things that have made us not get to expectations the past 2 years. It's been injuries for the pitching staff. It's been underperformance for the offense. So Alex Anthopoulos can talk about pitching all he wants, and I think he adds a notable name to the pitching staff. The pitching staff needs depth. The offense needs a difference maker, and that's why you get aggressive for Byron Buxton, especially when you have a situation. I know adding an outfielder may not seem like the most conventional idea for the Braves, but when you add that type of talent to an outfield that already could use an extra talent like that to really give guys the ability to remain fresh, remain healthy, it really is a good situation. And more than anything, for 3 years and $45 million, it's an excellent ad. You want to talk about a difference maker, you're not going to have an opportunity to get a better one than Byron Buxton.
Yeah, so let's go through the pros real quick. We'll go through, I promise we're going to go through the cons. We're going to talk about the injuries. I know people will want to talk about that. But let's go through the pros real quick. So first and foremost, Byron Buxton is a superstar player. We just covered that. MVP level hitter, runner, fielder. He's awesome. He can play center field. All right. He can play center field. And this is important because assuming you still have Michael Harris on the team, assuming Michael Harris is not part of the return, well, again, and we'll talk about the return at the end of this segment, you would have Ronald Acuna Jr., Michael Harris, Jurickson Profar, and Byron Buxton all in the same outfit. And people might think, well, that's too many. When you have the DH, that's a perfect amount. When you have a DH, that's the absolute. This is what I wanted the Braves to do for the last 6 months. We've talked about it. I've lost count how many times we talked about it. I want the Braves to add a dynamic outfielder that can rotate left field, right field, center field, and DH. So you'd have 4 outfielders for 4 spots, left field, right field, center field, and DH, and keep everybody healthy. And Byron Buxton included in that. There's nobody that the Braves need to try to keep healthy more than Ronald Acuna Jr. And if you add Byron Buxton to their team, there's no 2 players you need to try to keep healthy more than Ronald Acuna Jr. and Byron Buxton. And the best way to do that is to use the DH and rotate these players in and out of playing the field. That's even more important because right now the Braves don't have a DH. Like I know Sean Murphy and Drake Baldwin, that's kind of considered one's a DH, one's the catcher. The other one will catch when the other one DHs. But we don't know what Sean Murphy's going to be like next year. The guy just had hip surgery. Also, he's been extremely inconsistent with the bat. I would much rather have just a normal 2-catcher setup where one of them sits and the other one catches and let the outfielders DH. I think that's a much better use of that position. On the offensive side of the ball, and this is what Shawn was just talking about, what are you going to get from Ozzie Albies next year? What are you going to get from Michael Harris next year? Are they actually going to go get a real shortstop? Or is Mauricio Dubon going to be the shortstop? If that's the case, you know what you're going to get at a shortstop, which is nothing good, at least offensively. What are you going to get out of Austin Riley next year? We don't know. I have no idea. This is going to piss some people off, but I'm going to say it anyways. We don't know what we're going to get out of Drake Baldwin next year. There's been plenty of guys who have awesome rookie years and then come in year 2 and struggle. The term sophomore slump came from somewhere. It's because Michael it happens Harris. It happens all the time where your rookie year is better than your sophomore year and you come back down to earth a little bit. It should not stun anybody if that happens to Drake Baldwin next year. That doesn't mean he's a bad player. It's just not, it happens all the time. The only 2 hitters on the team I am 100% confident, if healthy, are awesome, right now are Ronald Acuna Jr. and Matt Olson. That's it. Those are the only two players I am 100% confident. If they're healthy, they're going to hit. That's not enough. There's just too many questions. And so if you're talking about the pros of Byron Buxton, the contract, which you just mentioned, $15 million a year is dirt cheap for his talent. Dirt cheap. That's crazy. 3 years of team control. He can DH. He can play left field. He can play center field. He can play right field. You know, if it's a tough lefty on the mound, you want to give Michael Harris the day off, you can have Acuna, Buxton, and Profar in the lineup and sit Harris. It's a beautiful setup. It's a ideal setup, in my opinion. And then you've added a superstar. You've now allowed yourself to have Mauricio Dubon be the shortstop because you added a superstar bat somewhere else in the lineup, right? It gives you more flexibility to not maybe have a great shortstop because you added an MVP level bat to the top. So yes, in the next set, we're going to talk about the cons. I'm going to talk about the injuries. We're going to talk about the cost, but I want to highlight the pros first. Byron Buxton makes a ton of sense for this roster, top to bottom, on defense, DH, up and down the lineup, help answering some unknowns about what the lineup is going to be. It answers a lot of questions.
And here's the other big thing, talent-wise, he adds more speed. You want to talk about a potential healthy Ronald Acuna Jr. and Byron Buxton at the top of the order? That's
crazy.
Absolutely
think about that. Think about Ronald Acuna Jr. and Byron Buxton as your 1 and 2.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah. But again, in a vacuum, it makes a lot of sense. But the real world, Major League Baseball, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, and there are reasons why, as awesome as it would be, and for that reason, as aggressive as the Braves should be to go make it happen, there also are some reasons to be a bit cautious. We'll discuss that, the cons, the costs, the injuries, and ideas of potentially expanding it beyond Byron Buxton. We'll discuss that in just a moment after a word from our partners.
KP, the website is chubbiesshorts.com. The brand is Chubbies, but it's not just shorts.
Yeah, don't be fooled by the website's name. This is a one-stop shop for all things that I love. Swimming trunks, golf polos, and even flannels. It fits me perfectly. One-stop shop is the place to go.
Yes, sir. KP, I've been wearing their flannel overshirt. It's like my favorite flannel and your softest sweater having a little baby. It's the best of both worlds. Classic flannel look with the warmth of a fleece. And we know it's that time of year to pull that off. The Chubbies flannel overshirt. It feels like your favorite flannel, but with the warmth of a cozy sweater. And for a limited time, Chubbies is giving our listeners 20% off your purchase at Chubbies with the promo code FOUL at checkout. But if it's Black Friday, skip the code. Take advantage of an even bigger markdown during their exclusive Black Friday sale. Just head to chubbiesshorts.com and make sure to support the show by telling them that Foul Territory sent you.
So, Stephen, when we talk about Byron Buxton, again, the underlying metrics, the overall production, when he's healthy, just the highlights that you see, you can clearly see why he is such a special talent. But the reason why a lot of people may not recognize that is because the simple truth is you just don't see it for long stretches. It's rare to see that. This past season, Byron Buxton had a career high in plate appearances with 542 plate appearances. Here's the issue with that. Not only is it only the second time that he's had over 500 plate appearances in his career, he's played in the league for a decade. There's only been 2 years when he's had 500 plate appearances. The other problem is that the first one happened in 2017. Between 2017 and 2024, Byron Buxton didn't clear 400 plate appearances. Injuries, both of the freakish kind and both of the concerning kind, have kind of defined Byron Buxton's career. And no matter how talented he is, nothing beats the ability to be available. And that clearly is a question mark, as it should be, especially as he gets into his 30s.
Yeah, so you can't have the Byron Buxton conversation without talking about injuries and games played and missed games. And the undeniable fact is that over the last 5 years, Byron Buxton has averaged about 99 games per season. So, and again, that's average. He had multiple seasons with less than that. Now, the good news is last season, like you just mentioned, he did, I think it was like 130 games. He got to 500 plus plate appearances, still put up a 5-win season. And that is the one good thing about Buxton. He is so good that even in these seasons where he's only playing 90, 100 games, he's still putting up like 4-win seasons because that's how talented he is. He doesn't need 162 games to put up a 4-win season. And if you ever got 162 games out of him, he'd probably put up like a 7-win season. So he is incredibly productive when he's on the field. He's just not on the field as much as you need him. And this is why I think the Braves specifically, I think why he is good for the Braves and why the Braves would be good for him, because the Braves have 3 outfielders already. You can rotate him at DH. This is critical for Acuna. It's critical for Buxton. It's critical for Harrison Profar. Let these guys rest their legs, 2 or 3 times a week. Michael Harris is a good enough defensive center fielder where you don't have to have – the Twins had to have Byron Buxton in center field every time he was on the field because that's how good he is. There was one season where he DH'd. I remember, I think it was like 2023 where they wanted to try to keep him healthy. But other than that, he's pretty much always in center field because that's how good he is. It's really hard to keep his glove off the field, especially when you're the Twins and you don't have a ton of talent anyways. Well, the Braves have plenty of defensive talent in center field. They don't have to play Byron Buxton in center field the way the Twins had to. They also have, we have the DH in the National League. You can rotate this DH spot and try to keep him healthy because the God honest truth is he's never been healthy enough to be a consistent player. It's actually incredible how productive he's been when he is in the lineup based on how much time he's missed. Because I don't know how usually when guys miss as much time as he's missed, they come back and they're rusty. They're not quite the same level. It takes a while to get going. We've seen that with Acuna a couple times. That doesn't happen to him. He comes back the next day and he is all-star Byron Buxton again. It's just a credit to how unbelievably naturally talented this kid is. But yes, the injuries are real. And you have to factor that in to any sort of trade, each sort of trade cost is that there's a very good chance he's going to play 100 games. Now, those are going to be some insanely productive 100 games, but it might just be 100 games. And that does factor into the cost that you pay. And we're going to talk about cost here in a minute. But you have to be honest with yourself. And listen, outfielders do not get more healthy as they get older. They get less healthy. Outfield is not Byron Buxton, I think, is 31. I think next year is his age 32 season. That is not a time when outfielders get healthier. That is usually a time when legs start to not be quite what they were. Father Time starts catching up. The fact that he was still 99th in sprint speed last year is absurd. That's a really good sign that his athleticism has not gone anywhere. It's not quite like Acuna where he's had 2 major knee reconstructions, and so you worry about the athleticism long term. That's not Buxton. Buxton's always had it's been different types of injuries with him, but the injuries have to be accounted for, and they have to be accounted for when you talk about the trade package. They have to be accounted for when you talk about the lineup. Again, I think the Braves need to be hyper aggressive with the DH and rotating these guys around to try to keep as many guys healthy as possible. But the injuries matter, and they have to be factored in.
Absolutely. And again, it's that 100 to 120 games is likely what he would play if he was a member of your team. But with the rotation that the Braves would have in place in their outfield, it's also about what 100 to 120 games that he plays. And if he and Acuna are both healthy going into the playoffs, that is a championship-worthy combination potentially. And that is a reason why the Braves should be aggressive. But another reason why, perhaps the biggest reason why of all the Braves should be aggressive, is that we can talk about the injuries. We can talk about the history of the injuries. You can look at the Twins situation and think that they may be willing to want to get off of his money. I want to make something very clear. If the Braves were to pursue Byron Buxton, it is going to hurt when it comes to the cost they are going to have to pay. Just because of his injury history, because of the long-term money that he's owed, because of the Twins situation, yes, those are contributing factors to why they may look to trade him. That doesn't drive down the cost, though, to where it would not cost a lot. I think the Braves should be willing to pay it, but it's going to exceed what many think. It's going to be the type of payment in terms of prospects that really will show up in terms of the quality that will remain in the minor league system if they were to make the trade.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've watched today in my mentions and other people's mentions, this conversation has been raging all day since Pass and dropped this, is everybody's got a fake trade, right? Everybody's got a fake trade idea of what it's going to cost. And I think almost universally, every fake trade, I mean, fake trades are always terrible, but every fake trade I've seen doesn't quite get that Byron Buxton is going to cost a ton. First of all, he's controlled for 3 more years. This is not a rental in any way, shape, or form. He has got 3 years of team control, which is massive. That is tremendously valuable on the trade market. Second, like we've already talked about, he is a A1 superstar level talent, Ronald Acuna Jr. level talent. And these guys do not come available very often. So there's almost a scarcity that gets tacked onto the value of just the odds and the chances that you're ever going to be able to trade for somebody else like him is, it's not going to come around again. And then third, he makes $15 million a year, which is dirt cheap. He's got, I think it's 3 years and $45 million left on his contract. He signed a big contract extension with the Twins, I think 2021 or 2022. I can't remember when it was, but he's about halfway through it now. But he's got 3 years and 4. That's nothing. That's how much Jurickson Profar makes. And I got news for you. Byron Buxton's a hell of a lot better than Jurickson Profar, but they make the same amount of money. So the trade cost is going to hurt. And I want Braves fans to hear that. Trading Bryce Elder and Nacho Alvarez is not going to get you Byron Buxton. I've seen too much of that. Trading Hayden Harris and Nacho Alvarez and pick a 19-year-old from A-ball is not going to get you Byron Buxton. You need to go to the very top of the Braves prospect list. Like if I'm the Twins, the first name I ask for, like I'm going to ask for Drake Baldwin. The Braves are not going to say yes to that. But the next name I ask for is going to be Hurston Waldrop. I want a guy that I think might be able to start at the top of my rotation for the next 6-7 years. The next guy I'm asking for is Cam Caminiti, or maybe even AJ Smith-Shawver. I'm asking for a ton. I'm asking for like your top 3 prospects. And the Braves don't have the best farm system in the world. Their top 3 prospects are not exactly the same as another team that maybe has a top 10 farm system, giving up, 2 of their top prospects and then another one lower down. It's going to hurt. And what I don't want to see, what's going to annoy me is if I see all these people clamoring for a Byron Buxton trade and then get mad at the team when they do it because it costs a lot. It's going to hurt. It's going to cost a lot. Now we're going to talk about the draft and a way the Braves can potentially replenish some of those prospects at the end of this show. But first and foremost, what I want people to hear from this is that trading for Byron Buxton is extremely expensive. He is the type of he's the type of player that never gets traded. He's the type of talent that doesn't get traded. He's on a contract that is dirt cheap. He's one of the best players in baseball. He's got 3 years of team control. That is crazy expensive. It is going to hurt. It is going to be names you do not want to trade. So just understand that. Understand that going in. And it might be to the point where it's prohibitively expensive. It might be the thing that stops the Braves from doing it. But we would be disingenuous if we did not come on the show and say trading for Byron Buxton is going to be incredibly expensive.
And the other important factor into this is, as much as we want to talk about how much this makes sense for the Braves and, how the Braves may be the preference of Byron Buxton for different reasons. I know that he has a full no trade clause, but Jeff Passan hinted at it, and Byron Buxton probably would have incentive to do it. The Braves are not the only team that he would waive his no trade clause to go to. That's number one. But more importantly, there probably are other teams out there, and I'll go as far as saying like the New York Mets, for instance, who probably make a bit more sense for Minnesota to talk to than the Braves because those teams probably would be able to offer a bit higher prospect package just because of the quality that's in their system.
I think the Mets have the #1 farm system in baseball.
And it's heavily filled with position player prospects.
Yeah.
That is very realistic. Like that could easily happen. And from Minnesota's perspective, that's what they're going to value. As we mentioned, going back to 2015, Byron Buxton was Minnesota's Ronald Acuna Jr.
Yeah.
They're looking to rebuild potentially. So if they're looking to do that, their best way to get a successful start to the rebuild is hitting a home run with this Byron Buxton trade.
Yeah.
And the Braves are not in as good position as other teams to be able to offer that.
Yeah, and this is not a salary. They're not clearing salary with the Byron Buxton trade.
Yes.
Like some of the other deals they did at the deadline, they were clearing salary. Byron Buxton, for his talent level, is underpaid by a ton.
Yes.
This is not some albatross contract and I saw that too. We're like, well, the Twins are trying to get off his money. His money is a asset. It is not a liability.
Especially coming after last season. Yeah.
Yeah. He is so far in the green in terms of positive trade value and surplus trade value. His contract in no way, shape, or form is some albatross hanging around their neck that they need to clear. People need to get that out of their head. He makes nothing relative to his talent level.
Yeah.
So it's just like Acuna. Just like Acuna. Acuna makes $17 million next year. Buxton makes $15 million next year. And they're both like MVP level players. It's exactly like Ronald Acuna Jr. So this is not the Twins needing to dump money and will be willing to take whatever package. This is, if we're going to trade our franchise, which is what Byron Buxton is, we need a monster haul in return that our fans see and are like, okay, we're going to rebuild, but at least we're kicking it off with a hell of a trade. And that's the mindset as a Braves fan you got to get into in terms of what this is going to cost.
And the Braves should be willing to trade that level of package. But again, it also needs to be understood what the Braves can offer as that type of package in their terms may not be to the level that other teams could. And that's going to be a big factor for the Twins. And for that being said, I know that, Joe Ryan, Pablo Lopez, there are a couple other Twins. And, we have been talking about a starting pitcher as well. Just to be candid, the Braves do not have the assets needed to go after a package deal of Byron Buxton and one of Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez to be able to get that deal done. The reason why I say that, Minnesota, if you go to them and you ask for Byron Buxton plus one of Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez, they are going to come back and say, we need Spencer Schwellenbach or Drake Baldwin to be the centerpiece of the deal, along with two of Hurston Waldrop, Cam Caminiti, and J.R. Ritchie. And the Twins are right in asking for that if they're trading that level of duo in Lopez and Ryan plus Buxton. I know I threw a lot of names out there. I know that I'm speculating, maybe more than people may like. The Braves do not have the goods, or the Braves are not going to be willing to pay the level of goods that they'll need to pay to land Byron Buxton plus a Pablo Lopez or a Joe Ryan. Byron Buxton, if the Braves trade for Byron Buxton, that's going to be their it move. That's going to be their all-in big move, not only of this offseason, but of this window. I think that needs to be made clear. It's worth doing, but expanding on it just doesn't make sense.
Well, yeah, and package deals like that are very rare anyways. If you're the selling team, you can almost always get more splitting the players up into separate deals, because when you put them together, the values get kind of jumbled together and you're not necessarily maximizing either guy. And so teams don't typically do it. When they have multiple, anytime a team is fire selling, like the Twins just did at the deadline, they didn't combine a bunch of players. They made 7 different trades to, different teams. That's what you do. I still think the Twins are going to trade. Their GM came out at the beginning of the GM meetings and said that they're going to build around Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan. That doesn't make any sense. You don't build around 30-year-old pitchers. So that's just the GM talking to avoid saying, yeah, we're going to sell these guys. I still think both guys are going to get traded. But yeah, if you're trading for Byron Buxton, you're already giving up a chunk of your farm system. And the Braves, like we talked about, they've got good players at the top of their farm system, but they don't have the depth. I remember last year, when the Red Sox traded for Garrett Crochet. The Red Sox made this massive trade for Garrett Crochet, and at the end still had Roman Anthony and Marcelo Meyer and a bunch of other guys that are awesome prospects in their farm system after they traded for Garrett Crochet. Well, the Braves don't have that. The Braves can't make a massive trade like that and still have a bunch of, they don't have that level. Yes, they can make one of these trades by combining enough big-time names, but that's kind of their limit right now. So, yes, I do not see any sort of like package deal. Those don't really happen that much anyways. Teams just get more by splitting players up. So I would not expect I honestly would not expect the Byron Buxton deal to happen. Most trades don't happen. I certainly wouldn't expect some sort of package deal.
Yeah, and I think that Passan was correct in giving it about a 35% chance.
And that might be high. Honestly.
Yeah. I think that's very fair because again, the Twins they can always keep him. They can. Always
there's nothing forcing them to trade him.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense coming off the healthiest season he's had in his career, plus the best season he's had in his career, arguably. That does make sense, but they don't have to trade him. But in terms of the Braves, one other point that I think in terms of the offseason that I think is worth making, again, if you trade for Byron Buxton, again, that clearly is your big move of the offseason as Correct. It should be. But I do think that there will be some significance in, we know the Braves want to add a starter, probably just as much as they want to add a bat. And even though I think going after Buxton should be where they're most aggressive, I think that them adding a pitcher will probably happen first before a Buxton deal does. I think the level at which they go to add a pitcher could give us a bit of an indication how serious or how potentially likely a Buxton move is. For instance, if the Braves were to go out and sign, some type of pitcher, like say it's a Chris Bassett or somebody like that, to a 2-year deal, in the $25 to $30 million deal, that's not that expensive of a contract. You've not traded away any prospects, and you're not going out to get a headline guy. Again, the Braves need reliable depth for their pitching rotation. If the Braves were to go to that level to go get a starting pitcher, then you really could see, okay, they've added their starter, but they still have all that they need to go make a Buxton deal happen. Now, if the Braves were to go out and trade for what you would consider a frontline starter, I think that makes a Buxton deal less likely. So in terms of the timeline and kind of how to get an idea of how likely a Buxton deal were to happen, I don't think that the Buxton deal happens soon. I think the Braves probably add their arm before they were to pursue a Buxton deal. But I do think the level to which they go and how they go about adding that arm could give an indication of how serious they are of getting Byron Buxton.
No, it's a good point. I mean, if they call the Mariners and say, hey, we want Luis Castillo, what kind of prospect package are you going to need for him? Then yeah, that definitely decreases the chances you're going to have enough left to be. And we don't frame it like this a lot, but we need to frame it like this more. You have to have the best offer for Byron Buxton out of however many teams are bidding on him. Your prospect package has to be the best. So what are the odds that you can trade for a guy like Luis Castillo or pick your favorite, pitcher target and still have the best trade offer for Byron Buxton? It's not high. It's probably one or the other. But like you said, if they go and sign Merrill Kelly for, a reasonable contract, $16, $17 million, don't have to give up the draft pick, which again, we're going to talk about here in a second, and don't give up any prospects, obviously, for a free agent signing, then hell yeah. I mean, you could certainly see like big green light. They're clearly not going to do their big move on the rotation. Maybe their big move is going to be Byron Buxton. So you're right. It is an indication. If they went out and signed Ranger, if we got the blue box tomorrow that they went out and signed Ranger Suarez and gave up the draft pick to do it, I would probably be in the middle, be like, well, they could technically still go get Buxton because they haven't given up any prospects yet. But that would be at the high end of their payroll because Suarez is probably going to cost $25 million. And Buxton would cost another 15. So then you get into like luxury tax stuff, which we're not going to get into on this show until it actually happens. I'm not going to do hypothetical luxury tax stuff. It gets way too complicated. So yeah, you're right. I mean, what they do there, and Scott made this point in our DMs today, the pitcher market is moving. Like we've seen multiple big time pitchers, obviously Dylan Cease and the Sonny Gray trade happened. There's a couple more in the last couple of days. I know Helsley signed. Who was the guy from the KBO that just signed? His name just left my head.
Cody Ponce.
Ponce, yeah, with the Blue Jays. Yeah, just got $30 million from the Blue Jays. So the pitcher market is moving. We could definitely see that move happen first. But I do agree with you. I think you could certainly tell by what they do on that side of the ball. You could probably draw a line to, does that increase or decrease the likelihood of Buxton?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be fascinating to watch at the end. We've talked about it from many different perspectives, but I feel that me and Steven are on the same page. And Steven, correct me if I'm wrong. If there is an off season to go get it done, you have so many reasons to go get it done. The team needs it. The offense needs it. You want to win now in this window. You have the ability to eventually replenish what you trade away with the fact that you have a pretty stacked opportunity to make this a very good draft to add to your system. Go get it done. That doesn't mean that you need to go crazy in getting it done. The Braves need to pay the high cost that it's going to take. But if the opportunity is there, get it done, get it squared away. It seems like that they're, again, isn't just speculation. This isn't speculation. This seems to be more smoke than anything. It seems like that there's general interest in wanting to get it done. If you see the finish line within reach, cross it. Again, if it makes sense. But we be willing to make it make sense, I think is the best way to put it. But again, we talk about why the Braves should do it. It's because, as we mentioned before, the Braves are really set up well to add a lot of talent from the 2026 draft, which is expected to be one of the best ones we've seen in a while. The opportunity is there for the Braves to add a lot of good talent to their farm system from the 26 draft. More on that in just a moment. So, Steven, let's talk about the 2026 draft. And most importantly, let's talk about a week from now, December 9th. Now, I know that many people who listen to this podcast as Braves fans, they're Hawks fans. We may have some Hornets fans. We may have some Grizzlies fans. We may have some Pelicans fans, so on and so forth. I mention all those teams because in recent years, fans of those teams have been able to be excited in the NBA draft. Well, the Major League Baseball now has a version of that. It's probably not to the same level as the NBA draft, honestly, but they do have the 2026 draft lottery next Tuesday, December 9th. Not sure at the time at the moment, but it is noteworthy because the Braves are right in the middle in terms of getting the potential to have a top pick. Now, the ability for them to get an overall top pick is pretty low, but they have, I believe, a 45% chance to get a top 6 pick, and I think like a 75% chance to get a top 8 pick. This is a noteworthy night because the storyline of the 26th draft that in terms of the top 10 of the 26th draft, the position player depth in this draft is one of the best in terms of quality that we've seen in recent history. So next Tuesday, December 9th, it's going to be an important day. That will tell us where the Braves will pick in the first round, and that could really, really, really be a good night for the Braves in terms of, again, adding quality to their minor league system.
Yeah, so it came out today. I think it was this morning that the comp or the pick that the Braves got for Drake Baldwin winning Rookie of the Year was going to be the 26th pick in the draft, which I think has like $3.5 million tied to it in terms of its pool. And then on top of that, what Shawn was just talking about is they're going to get a top 10 pick most likely get a top 10 pick. I think they're guaranteed to get a top 10 pick. I think they have like a 75 or 80% chance to get a top 8 pick. And then I think you would say like 45% to get a top 6. So it could be a massive night for the Braves. And this does tie to the Buxton conversation because like we just said, to trade for Buxton, you're going to have to deplete your farm system a little bit at the top. Not a little bit, a significant amount at the top to satisfy whatever Minnesota is going to ask for because they're going to be able to ask that from a lot of teams. Well, you can then turn around in next July's draft and replenish a lot of that talent because you're going to have I mean, let's be honest. In terms of like ability to add impact players, this is probably the Braves' most significant draft in a decade since the rebuild. Um, I think that's fair. I don't think that's hyperbole. And you add the fact that not only are they going to have a top 10 pick, but they've got this extra, what is effectively a first round pick. All of this draft pool money. And obviously, if they sign a qualified free agent, they would lose that pick. So we need to mention that. But if they don't sign a qualified free agent, if they instead trade for somebody like Byron Buxton as their big move and keep that pick, they can add a ton of talent in the draft, including like a clear headline. Whatever you take, let's say they get the 5th pick in the draft, whatever it is, we'll know in a week. The draft lottery is on Tuesday in the middle of the winter meetings. Winter meetings start on Sunday. Let's say they take the 5th pick. Well, whoever they take there, assuming it's a guy who's around that level of ranking in the draft, is probably going to be the best player in the Braves farm system, or very close to the best player in the Braves farm system, depending on where you have Cam Caminiti and depending on how J.R. Ritchie and we'll see what all these shortstops the Braves drafted last year end up doing next year. But yes, this is a massive opportunity to significantly upgrade your farm system. And it's a massive opportunity to potentially replenish your farm system if you, for instance, make a very large trade that's going to take multiple top prospects. So it's all connected. We did learn today that the Baldwin pick is going to be 26. We'll learn next week, a week from today, actually, what that top pick is, where they fall in the lottery. But yeah, it's easily the most significant draft for the Braves in probably a decade.
Yeah, I think the only one that would compare to it was the 2017 or 18 draft where they didn't sign the pitcher Carter something. They didn't
Carter
sign
Stewart.
They didn't sign
Yeah,
Carter.
I guess those rebuild drafts were pretty high. Like Ian Anderson was.
But he
Ian
was
Anderson
three.
was a third pick, I think.
He
But
was
he was
third overall.
they went under slot for him. Kyle
But
Wright was like the 5th pick.
Yeah, the year after they didn't sign Carter Stewart, they had the 9th pick and they picked Shea Langoliers, and then they had the 21st pick and they picked Braden Shoemake. So that would be the most recent draft that compares.
Yeah.
But again, I want to talk about the addition of that 26th pick due to Drake Baldwin winning Rookie of the Year. The reason why that again is so important is because of that slot money and what the Braves can do with that slot money. We've talked about, want to reemphasize again, now that they've got all that money to work with to really add quality talent in this draft, you can replenish what you trade away to go get a difference maker like a Byron Buxton. So it gives you reason to be aggressive and go do it. But the other point that I want to make is this, is because you have that extra pick and that extra slot money, the Braves, whether it's been in the top 10 or whether it's been in the 20s, they more often than not have wanted to take advantage of the slot money and kind of go an underslot guy with their first pick so they can have more money to work with in the draft. I think that's fine if you want to do it with that 26th pick. But now that you've got that 26th pick and that slot money, just like you can be aggressive in a trade, go be aggressive and get a headline, legitimate top 5, 6, 7 talent in what's supposed to be a top-heavy loaded draft that really could bring your top position player in years into the system. That's the other stage that the Braves can be aggressive on because they landed this extra pick. They could really land themselves. We want to talk about difference makers. They can give themselves a better shot of landing that type of talent for the long term from this draft. So that is something else that I want to see them do, especially if they were to get a pick in the top 5. By the way, here are kind of the odds breaks down. The Braves have a 7.5% chance basically of getting the first pick. They have a 25% chance of landing in the top 3, 45% chance of landing in the top 6, 75% chance of landing in the top 8, and they basically have 99% chance of landing in the top 10. When I say their percentage chance, what I'm meaning is out of 100%, what are the odds that they could potentially get each pick slot? That's how it breaks down. So again, a 75% chance to land a top 8 pick in a draft that is supposed to be one of the deepest we've seen in the top 10 in terms of quality position player prospects. Be aggressive as possible to get the best talent that you can.
Yeah. And obviously the way the draft is set up, it's not only the fact that you get a higher pick, depending on where you land in the lottery, but the higher the pick you get, the more bonus pool money you get for each of your top 10 picks, I think it is. So, yeah, it's a massive deal. And even in this last draft, the Braves, what you're talking about, how they usually go under slot in the first round they did that again in 2025. When they drafted Southacene as their first pick, it was an underslot deal so they could get I think his name was Briggs McKenzie, right? The
Yeah.
guy out of LSU. They had to buy him out of his commitment.
Yeah, they went over slot in the third and fourth round because they went under slot in the first. Yeah.
So yeah, they do that a lot. And I agree with you. As long as they don't end up losing that pick to a qualified free agent, I would love to see them in that, if it's like a top 5 pick or whatever, be aggressive, maybe go at slot or maybe even over slot and go get like a high level guy that's clearly the top guy in the system. It's kind of I want to see the Braves farm system get back to where it's like at least in the top half of the league. I know it's been underrated probably because guys like Drake Baldwin and Schwellenbach came out of nowhere and weren't really ranked where they should have been. And so I do think the Braves farm system is better than it's been publicly rated, but I still think it's been, below average, I would say. I still think it's been in the bottom half of the league instead of the top half of the league the last few years. So I do want to see that system get back to where it's a weapon that you can use at all times. But yeah, this 2026 draft is going to be one of the biggest Braves drafts we've seen in a long time. So, and obviously we'll learn on Tuesday where they're picking in the first round.
But hey, that's kind of, a silver lining. You don't want to go through the struggles that the Braves did in the 2025 season to get to this point. But now that we're past it, we can at least have some fun with it. It's just another added, really exciting, aspect of this offseason for the future. And hopefully the Braves will be able to take as full advantage of it as possible. We typically don't mention split contract signings, minor league signings, these small, kind of irrelevant signings that the Braves do, but do want to bring up a name that the Braves did add back into the system in Danny Young. Danny Young signed a split contract. Young will be, I believe, out until the middle of the season. I believe that he had Tommy John surgery early last year. This is his second stint with the Braves. He had a bit of a stint in 2023, looked pretty good in the opportunities that he had. But, Steven, it's the intrigue of Young stuff that if he comes back and proves to be healthy, it could be. We've seen the Braves do this, sign these injured pitchers because they're intrigued by their stuff. Danny Young could be a bit more notable of a signing than most because of his history with the Braves and also the fact that he has some pretty decent stuff when he's healthy.
Yeah, big strikeout guy. I mean, you go look. He was with the Braves in 23, kind of a cup of coffee. I think he was actually with the Braves at the end of 22 and the beginning of 23. Cup of coffee. I think he only had like 10 innings pitched in 23. And then he spent the last couple of years with the Mets with Jeremy Hefner, by the way, who is the Braves' new pitching coach. And I'm sure that's not a coincidence, but tons of strikeouts. Guy strikes out a ton of people. It's like a fastball, sinker, slider combo. Not the hardest throw in the world, but just gets a ton of swing and miss. It's obviously a very funky arm angle. It's a very uncomfortable bat. The Braves always are interested in these kind of really strong strikeout to walk ratio guys, which is what Young is. And he signed a split contract, and I'm not going to get into all the mechanics of that, but typically split contract guys are on the 40-man. Like Vidal Brujan just signed a split contract, and he's still on the 40. So I'm pretty sure Danny Young gets a 40-man spot. And then you get X amount of money if you're in the majors, and you get X amount of money if you're in the minors. It allows teams to send guys to the minors who maybe don't have minor league options, like Vidal Brujan, when he signed that split contract, can now be sent to the minors, even though he doesn't have minor league options. Danny Young is the same. Now with Young, it's not as big a deal because, like Shawn just said, he's going to be out till like July, maybe August. He had Tommy John surgery in May, so this is a second half of the season. Might get some reinforcements type of deal. It's very little money. As soon as the 60-day IL opens back up, when we get to spring training, Danny Young will immediately go on that, which will clear his 40-man spot. So there's not a lot of risk here. There's not a lot you're paying for. They're banking on some upside with the strikeout stuff. They know Danny Young. Obviously, Jeremy Hefner really knows Danny Young, and I'm sure that connection helped a lot. So yeah, not a big signing. We saved it to the end of the show, but he is going to be on the 40-man for a little bit. So it's a big enough signing where we need to mention it. split contract. He'll be on the 60 IL when the season starts, and maybe some second half reinforcements.
So here we go. I know that the Danny Young level of signing may not really get you going in terms of excitement, but this show was meant to get you going in terms of excitement. The connection to Byron Buxton, the hot stove heating up with some notable names. Some of the best pitchers are off the market. The most obvious pitchers are off the market now because the stove is heating up. The Braves getting more indications of just how beneficial the 2026 draft could be. All of these things we could see come to fruition, or we could get more insight on over the next 10 to 12 days, especially with the winter meetings being next week. So buckle up. The ride is about to get a bit faster, but a bit more exciting, and we're going to have you fully covered here on the Hammer Territory podcast. Stephen Tolbert, anything else from you as we wrap up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast?
Nope. Yeah, winter meetings start this weekend. Start on Sunday. They're from Sunday to Wednesday or Thursday next week. So the winter meetings are where stuff gets real, where stuff happens. You'll see trades, you'll see signings. Most winter meetings have at least one big move in them. This is not like the GM meetings, which is like a precursor. The GM meetings or the winter meetings are where stuff actually really starts to happen. Teams really want to start focusing in on signings. Guys are already off the board. You got all the GMs there, and they're all focused on team building. There's nobody that's, doing other stuff or talking with owners. Everybody is in the building. I think it's in Orlando this year. Everybody's in the building and they're focused on team building. And so you can get a lot of stuff done in a short amount of time. And I say all that to say, we're going to have it covered. Whatever happens at the winter meetings, anything Braves related, we will have it covered on here the moment it happens. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you are. The off season is heating up in every way.
Yeah, when people talk about how exciting the first few days of NFL free agency is or NBA free agency, this is baseball's version of that. So again, buckle up. It hopefully is going to start to get real exciting. But hey, always a pleasure to do these with you, Stephen. You can find Stephen Tolbert at B_Outliers, myself at Stats SAC on Twitter/X. You can find Hammer Territory across all forms of social media, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. Brad, Scott, me, Steven, you're going to be seeing a lot of us over the next week or so, breaking down all the latest rumors, signings, moves, potentially what can occur. Hopefully there will be plenty of them as the Braves look to get back to contention next year and beyond. Until next time, go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.